Claude Fable 5 is by far the best AI model that I've ever laid my eyes upon and ever laid my hands upon. But here's the thing. Claude uses way too many freaking tokens. We all have trouble, especially with this new change that we can actually only use Fable for about half of our plan. And so you're gonna have to also still use Opus, which in essence is not bad, but that again means that even though Fable is already crazy expensive, you can't even use your full plan, only a part. And so in this video, I want to go over my top tips to spend less tokens so you can enjoy Fable more for just how beautiful and how good it is. So here are my top things that I would do to not waste your tokens, as I've seen a lot of people with titles like this, like, oh, I spent thousands of dollars in a couple of hours. I spent $2,000. I spent $5,000. Here's how to not do that. So first of all, and this is the core that you should really kind of live by whenever you're using these newer AI models, and that is one mission per chat. Even though we all like to talk about the massive new context windows, you almost never want to use all of it. And that's because you should only try to use it for the most draining task, the one you need all the context for. But at the end of the day, if you think about it, every message resends the entire conversation history. So a 50 message chat means you pay for the same text 50 times over. You may think that a whole chat is basically just like a one chat box right here, where it's one message, but you can actually see it in a nicer and better way here over in Claude itself. As you see, turn 1, you've got the system prompt, right? And then a little bit of a new message. Then the next turn, it basically has to redo whatever it did the first time, and so it stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks. And to be a bit more specific, I see a lot of people who are like discussing one thing in a chat, then another, then another, then another. And here's the thing. Even though it may be efficient to not have to switch or re-explain some older stuff you were doing, most of the time, and you will notice this especially if you've been using Claude for a while, Claude itself can let you know when to start either a new session, or if you're starting a project and for some reason it doesn't spin up these sub-agents, it'll tell you to do different things in different sessions. Why? Well, because it's a waste of tokens to do many things all at once, because it has to load all this context for all these different tasks. And a good example for this would be if you have a website and you have different parts of that website that are completely different with different databases. Matter of fact, you've got two websites with completely different projects, different databases, different everything. Now, would it be wise to do both of these in one session or split them up? Or, in one session, do them one after another? 3 different options, right? So option number 1 is to do them both in the same session at the same time. This could work because it's theoretically speaking time efficient if you're using a right model like Fable that can make these sub-agents, but now this one chat has to load all the context for both these websites. And so Project A and Project B, both these websites, will have the context loaded for both, when in reality, it didn't have to be done for the entirety of the process, right? Because theoretically speaking, if you were to do it in A and B, right, 2 different sessions, then for session A, we're just loading whatever context we need for session for website A. And then in session B, right, we're also only loading the context we need for session B. Now, this is of course a very simple explanation, and a counter could be, yeah, but doesn't that mean you have to do an initial message the first time so it has to read all your files? And yes, that's true, but if you're doing a couple of messages, it can pretty quickly become apparent that it will be way better to split these things up. Or, and here's the kicker, if you do want to do multiple projects all in one, then the best thing to do is to address as much as possible in one prompt. Why? Well, because theoretically speaking, output tokens from Claude, from ChatGPT, are way more expensive than input tokens. You inserting a lot in that chat box is relatively a lot cheaper than you letting the AI speak a ton, but also see it like this. If you're loading it all, right, everything, but you're only loading it once, that's a way better situation than loading it once, then kind of adding a bit to it because it has to read everything again and again and again. I didn't want to, but I accidentally made a little token counter here. And if you guys want it, it's going to be over in my school. So now, hello world, what is my date of birth? I don't know, normally that would not be a really heavy question, right? But take a look at it. So if I'm asking, I actually did it the wrong way around. I should add this one first. So the assistant first, and then next is user. There we go. Right, so now what it becomes apparent, hopefully pretty quickly, And I hopefully made this at least a bit understandable. The long story being that instead of it being a very simple sure bud, like a very simple, very simple 1 or 2 token type of situation, you can see now our turn 6 took 79 tokens, right? When in reality, it didn't have to take nearly as much because it was a very simple interaction, but it's because it's loading all the previous things as well. And now that same situation applies to repasting a similar file or the same file over and over. Let's say you want to start analyzing a Word document, a PDF. The moment you attach it, it's going to take a lot of tokens, right, to analyze that entirety of the thing. But that's actually not too bad. The thing is, it's now pretty much indexed. I mean, AIs have gotten so smart that now it knows what you're talking about. If for every single conversation you're having right now in the session, you keep re-adding it, you're just wasting a lot of tokens because it still probably knows. And here's the thing. If you're switching sessions all the time, it makes sense to add it here and there whenever you need it. But in the same session, a couple of months ago with ChatGPT, it would have forgotten after 2 messages. So every single time you wanted to edit something, it would have forgotten. Nowadays, AI is so good, it remembers at least for a very long time, especially if you stay in the same chat. Here's the thing though, this is one thing that can instantly save you so much, right? Fable thinks, but cheap models type. If you let Fable plan out the structure and review the results in the meantime, Sonnet or Haiku, or actually Opus is what I personally use for this, can do the majority of the work. Fable quality for roughly 20% of Fable cost. Now, supposedly, Fable can already do this on its own. For my personal results, what I just do is I let Fable think out the structure, what exactly should we be building, and then I let Opus actually do the groundwork, or perhaps Sonnet, depending on what Fable thinks I should use. I literally tell it, make a structure for which model I should use for which things, so I can build this out in different sessions, so I also don't have to load too much context whenever it's not necessary. This saves you a lot of tokens by not letting Fable build everything that a simple, cheap worker could have also done. Mechanical work becomes a script. Renaming, reformatting, calculations, have Fable write a small script once and then rerun the same script forever and ever and ever for free. And this comes back to what I talked about in my How to Master Fable 5 guide. Like some stuff you need to do ASAP before July 7th. And that has to do with make the structure, build the plan, build the script, build the XYZ, whatever. You build something once that you can hopefully use for the next couple of months, and you rerun it hopefully forever for the next couple of months for the foreseeable future. You don't use Fable as a question answer. Most things you don't really need to use Fable for. You need it, and mostly you're going to use it for the most important structure pieces, for writing scripts, auditing your scripts. Is the method that we're doing it right now good? Those type of things. Cut or cap the output here. So again, if we go back, and this is one thing that a lot of people have no idea about, if we go back to token counters, right? The way the tokens are structured is they're basically a certain set amount of different combinations of letters. And the back end of this is you basically have for every single letter you insert into a chat box or whatever, there's bits to it, right? Which again are in a byte. And we, to some extent, decided to put a couple of combinations, like for example, the word hello or hello space or dot world or space world or double space world, all those different things into a certain token. I believe ChatGPT right now has about 120,000 or something like that different tokens. So for example, dot this, it's not this, it's dot this. And this would be a different token. We can actually take a look at this, for example. Maybe, oh, this is again dot this. So let's take away the dot here. You can see, okay. I was not able to show it right here, but you can see nth is now the token. So a token for nth and a token for is. The point being here, all these things are a lot cheaper if you sent them versus if the AI has to generate them. And this really comes back to really how AIs work. At the end of the day, they're generating basically what the next token in this line is going to be based on parameters. And there's a very difficult explanation for exactly how that works and how inference works and all those parts. But the long story short is every single time you type something in, or it types something in, it's looking for that next word in line, that next token in line. Now, that is basically where the cost is coming from, the computational power for looking what the next word or the next token has to be. Every single time you insert them, you're given them, right? But every single time it has to output them, it has to take the tokens that you inserted, right? When you're inputting, it has to do some sort of analysis within its systems for what exactly you said. But more importantly, it has to do the proper analysis for what type of output to give, what type of combination of different token output it has to give back out. And this to some extent is way more difficult than you need it to be, but the long story short is, if you tell Claude to just make sure it doesn't add any fluff, to make the answers as short as possible, specifically for Fable, just get to the freaking point always. The minimum amount of words it can use, it should use, unless that would cost a lot of tokens to cut the amount of words, right? But then most of the tokens are being spent internally, but really the actual output perhaps can still be significantly lower. So here you can say answer only, no recap, no summary, no options menu, just nothing, just straight to the freaking point, build it, and tell me yes when it's done. And then you can perhaps in another session rerun things to see if it was actually done correctly, or give me a small summary, or yabba dabba doo. You get the idea. Now, here's what I said earlier in the video, but I want to reiterate it. Batch your questions. Instead of doing the back and forward 5 times, all 5 of those things, matter of fact, ask 200 questions all at once. That's why I use things like whisper flow and just talk into the freaking mic. I start blabbering on. First of all, because input tokens are cheaper than output, but more importantly, because of that system that I just showed you, the interaction thing that I just showed you. Every single time you go back and forth, you're wasting a ton of tokens that you do not want to waste. The better idea would be to just send everything all at once, because even though you've got yourself some setup costs, I kind of closed the thing in the background here, you've got some setup costs, this system prompt, let's call it, relatively here, you're being so much more efficient by not going back and forth. So yeah, that's one thing you have to, of course, understand. Watch extended thinking. Thinking tokens build too. This is kind of a counter to what I said before of if only the output that you see is shorter, perhaps the thinking process is longer. For example, if you've got a ton of skills installed that could make your processes more efficient, it can actually still cost you more tokens if it has to check them all. So thinking also costs. Deep reasoning on for hard problems, but off for easy ones. And the long story short there is, don't use Fable on max for a Fable easy type of question that Fable on its okay day or something like that could also do. Don't pay premium thinking rates for write me a freaking email. And this actually counts all the time, not just with Fable. Think of which model to use, but more importantly, think of the effort values you want to give your model. When I was doing the little build right just now for how much tokens we would spend, right, in that I could find here more models and, for example, Fable 5. But even in Opus 4.8, you can see I've got different sort of effort values and the extended thinking mode. This really, for the most part, if you want it to be fast, doesn't have to be on, and actually doesn't have to be on for most things. And also you can most likely go to Opus 4.8 on high instead of Opus 4.8 on max for most tasks. Or Fable, when you're running it, you don't have to run Fable on the maximum difficulty or the maximum effort. It just is only required for the most difficult tasks you can think of, which is really, when you break it down, not many things. And the one thing that I think could make a couple of you guys laugh, really, this is a really, really funny one. It's to make sure your subscription, right, the amount of tokens you can spend outside of your subscription is capped. Some people most likely will end up this month with an absolutely massive bill from trying out our freaking Claude Fable, which is funny in essence, but in reality could be a pretty big problem. And what I mean with that is, if you go right here to usage credits, make sure that you've got a limit on this one, okay? You can see I've got a limit right here set right now to 20 bucks. I don't know why it's still like that. But the kicker would be just either turn this thing off so it can't use all the money you've got left in your credit account, or make sure the limit is set to something reasonable for you. I remember a couple of weeks ago, I thought, you know what? Let me just put some money into my Claude account and let it keep working when it runs out. Can't be that bad, right? So I loaded my bad boy up with $1,000 thinking, my subscription is 200 bucks. I can probably last off of this for a while, right? And I was dead wrong. It was gone, at least I think maybe $860 were gone within a couple of hours, where usually the entire subscription lasts you what? A couple of weeks, maybe a month for $200. And now $800 are gone in a freaking instant. And that's because, well, like I said at the start, these the tokens, the way they're costing right now is so freaking good inside a subscription. people don't really get just how good a deal you're actually getting. But if you're using them on usage credits, which again is basically what you've got right here, they're 20 to 100 times more expensive when you break it down. That's why I told people maybe just get freaking 5 Claude subscriptions right now and just do it through there between now and July 4th. And that's why using Claude to the best of your ability before July 7th, is so freaking crucial. It's because afterwards it's super, super expensive. But anyway, if you're already using Claude Fable, using Claude actually, because theoretically speaking, this could also be for normal Claude, it could be for anything. Use these tips to make sure you don't go over your freaking budget. Matter of fact, start with setting a budget, I'm gonna say. And yeah, all of these rules I think are just something you can get started with right now. For your first prompt already, you can probably just start building it differently by not doing everything in separate chats and also not going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth if you don't have to, because you're wasting a ton of tokens on that, perhaps even without realizing it. This, by far, is the biggest thing you can change right now. And if you do not fully understand it, ask Claude to explain it to you. It'll become clear straight away. And make sure you join our free school if you're interested in getting more tips and tricks. I'll post the guide for this down below in there as well. It's the first link in the description. Absolutely 100% free and really fun. So make sure you join it. And I'll see you guys again in another AI video, hopefully somewhere later today, because, well, we don't have much time for Fable, so I'm going to be posting a lot of guides.